When we discuss the history of MMOs, there are a couple games that always seem to come up. Games like Ultima Online, EverQuest, RuneScape 2 and vanilla World of Warcraft. But there is one other extremely influential game that often gets forgotten. A game that has been quietly existing in maintenance mode for years, but now seems to be on the verge of a comeback. And that game is Guild Wars 1. Today, we talk about how Guild Wars 1 was different and why many people loved it so much. We'll talk about how I fell in love with the game as a child, how we all came back earlier this year to revive the game temporarily, and about how it may now finally be time for Guild Wars 1 to come back for real, with Guild Wars Reforged just a couple days away. This is Guild Wars. When I was 11 years old, I desperately wanted to play World of Warcraft. I cannot overstate how much WoW was taking the world by storm back in 2006. Anywhere you went on the internet, people were talking about this game. There were programs on TV talking about how people were destroying their lives by playing WoW the whole day and neglecting everything else. And to 11-year-old Lara, that sounded freaking awesome! At the time, I was busy playing my first ever MMO, RuneScape. And while I enjoyed that game a lot, the prospect of another online game like that just seemed amazing. But there was a problem. World of Warcraft had a subscription fee. And there was no way my parents were going to pay for that, especially with all the talk of kids skipping school to play WoW. I tried to convince them to let me pay for RuneScape membership with my pocket money, but they were not budging. World of Warcraft being almost twice as expensive as a RuneScape membership seemed like a pipe dream. But still, I was eager to play more online games like this. I wanted to explore more worlds, level up more characters, and really immerse myself in another MMO. And that is when I first learned of Guild Wars. Guild Wars 1 looks just like World of Warcraft. Well, actually, the art style looks quite different, and the gameplay was also very different. But 11-year-old me didn't really think about that. This was an online game with way better graphics than RuneScape, and it didn't have a subscription fee. You just bought the box, and then you could keep playing forever without having to pay monthly. Nowadays, this doesn't sound too special, but for an online RPG like this was quite novel back in 2006. So, I saved up my pocket money for a couple months, bought Guild Wars, and I absolutely loved this. Some people will tell you that Guild Wars 1 is not actually an MMO, and they're kinda right. The developers themselves called Guild Wars a CORPG, not a massive multiplayer online RPG, but a cooperative online RPG. While you're in a city or outpost, you will see other players. You can chat, trade, join guilds, everything you're used to from a regular MMO. But the second you set foot outside of the gate and enter an explorable area, you will find yourself in an instanced open world map. Out here, it is just you and your party. When I first heard of Guild Wars 1, I wasn't too sure what to think about this, but it actually works really well. Every explorable map feels a bit like a dungeon. There are no mounts, and running past mobs is actually quite hard, so you really have to fight your way through enemies, and this makes the world feel massive. You can fast travel to outposts and cities you have visited before, but if you gotta be somewhere in the explorable worlds, prepare to fight your way there. Reaching a new outpost feels just like you're reaching a bonfire in a Souls game, and reaching a new area can feel like a real milestone. Early on in the story, you cross the Shiver Peaks from Ascalon to Kryda, and wow, reaching the tropical lands of Kryda after spending hours in the Shiver Peaks is a gaming memory I will never forget. You might think that this instanced open world would make the game feel less social, but that is not necessarily the case. In a lot of other MMOs, you will see other players in the open world, but a lot of the time you're doing solo stuff and you're not actually playing together. But in Guild Wars 1, the dungeon-style open world means that the whole game is balanced around playing with a party. Your character is pretty much never running around alone. The whole game is balanced around playing together. Add to this all your typical MMO elements like guilds, an economy, players hanging out in cities, and you actually get a surprisingly social game. But what if you don't wanna play with others? Or what if you're playing the game 20 years later and you can't find someone to play with? Fortunately, the developers did actually think of this, introducing henchmen. Instead of teaming up with real players, you can add NPCs to your party. This means that you can play the entire PvE game entirely solo if you want to. Later on in the game's life cycle, they even introduced heroes, which are basically henchmen that you can customize. You can change their gear, their builds, give them specific orders. It feels a bit like Baldur's Gate 3, and it means that even 20 years later, you can still play all PvE content in Guild Wars, even if you're playing solo. The original game features a linear story for you to play through. It has you journey all over the continent, doing quests, completing instant story missions, leveling up, and once you're done with the story, there is a huge amount of completionist goals to go for. This instant structure and linear story makes Guild Wars feel almost like a different interpretation of what an online RPG can be. Like in some alternate reality, the MMO genre didn't get so heavily influenced by WoW, and it would have stuck closer to traditional single-player RPGs. A large hostile world with a linear story and a party of adventurers, and those adventurers can be NPCs or real players. This formula actually meant that after the original game was a success, the developers could repeat it. Guild Wars Factions came out a year later, and it wasn't an expansion, but instead it was an entirely new standalone campaign. It featured a new continent, new classes, a new starter zone, new missions to play through. You could choose to make a new factions character, or if you also own the original game, you could bring over your old character and skip the starter zone. And then, just 6 months later, we got Guild Wars Nightfall, letting us explore the continent of Alona and introducing those customizable heroes. Gosh, can you imagine how quickly these games came out? These were all full-length standalone RPG experiences, and 3 of them came out over the course of just 1.5 years. Wows. As a kid, I started off with Prophecies, the original game, but it didn't take me long to get Factions as well. And then when Nightfall came out, I wanted to play it so badly that I did all kinds of chores for my parents until I saved up enough money. One of my favorite things to do in the game was actually to collect skills. Guild Wars 1 had really interesting build crafts. The game wasn't nearly as fast-paced as something like Guild Wars 2, but there was a huge amount of tactical depth, and a large part of that depth came from the skill system. In Guild Wars 1, each player character has a skill bar, and you get to pick freely from a massive pool of skills. Each skill works differently, has different damage types, different mana costs, different interactions. Putting together a build is kinda like making a deck in a trading card game. You're trying to pick skills that synergize well, and wow, there are so many skills. The possibilities for interesting builds are nearly endless, and that is also because you can pick skills from other classes. That's right, in Guild Wars 1 you pick your primary class, but then you also get to pick a secondary class, giving you access to all of its skills and most of its attributes. You can come up with some really fun combos. In my last playthrough, I played as a monk/warrior, which meant I was a healer, but I was also using sword and shields, and I could actually hold my own in battle using some warrior skills. Is it optimal? Definitely not, but I had so much fun with this build. And that is where I think Guild Wars 1's skill system really shines. You can play the game, collect skills like a TCG, and then come up with some really fun decks, or builds, I mean. Combining skills from different classes like this really opens the door to a wild variety of builds. The developers actually confirmed that Magic the Gathering was a huge inspiration. This deep buildcraft also led to a thriving PvP scene. There was guild versus guild, random arenas, team arenas, and if you could win the Heroes Ascent tournament, your name would be proudly announced to the whole server. I never tried much PvP as a kid, but Guild Wars 1 genuinely did esports before esports was a huge thing. There were major tournaments, and I know many people who spent almost all of their playtime in PvP. And that is kind of the appeal of Guild Wars 1, I guess. It is a solid RPG experience you can play solo or with others. TCG like buildcraft, deep PvP systems. It is no wonder that this game is remembered fondly by many. So why did it die? Well, Guild Wars 1 never actually fully dies, but after 3 campaigns the developers decided they wanted to do things that they couldn't do in the existing game. They were prototyping these more seamless open world experiences, where you could actually see other players in the open world. Eventually, that led them to the decision to make a whole new game, Guild Wars 2. They did put out one more expansion pack and also some story content for Guild Wars 1 while they were developing Guild Wars 2. But after Guild Wars 2 came out, Guild Wars 1 went pretty solidly into maintenance mode. Guild Wars 2 is a very different game from Guild Wars 1, and because of that, liking one of the games doesn't necessarily mean you will like the other. I always considered myself lucky for really enjoying both games, but I know plenty of Guild Wars 1 veterans who never got into the sequel, and I also know plenty of Guild Wars 2 players who tried the original and didn't like it. Many of them kinda struggle with the fact that you can't jump. Fortunately for the Guild Wars 1 fans though, the servers for Guild Wars 1 never shut down, and with Heroes and Henchmen, the game remained a pretty solid experience, even if you were playing solo. But still, after years of no major updates and no new content, only the most dedicated players stuck around. Guild Wars 1 didn't fully die, but it wasn't really fully alive either. But that all changed a couple months ago. Yes, this is where the story of Guild Wars 1 gets a major plot twist. I don't think a lot of people saw this coming after 10 years of maintenance mode, but the game is currently having a bit of a comeback. I'll tell you what happened from my perspective. So, about a year ago, I was really feeling like playing some Guild Wars 1 again. Every couple years I play for the game, not just for nostalgia, but also because it's genuinely still a great RPG. My Guild Wars 2 channel has grown quite a bit in the past couple years, so I figured that this might be a great opportunity to introduce the game to my audience and play for Guild Wars 1 with some real people again. So, I started putting plans together for a stream playthrough, but then I realized that the game's 20th anniversary was right around the corner. I can't just be the only person that wants to play this game again, right? What if we tried to make this a community event that's a little bit bigger than just my stream? That sounded like it could be a lot of fun. I got to work. I made a website with a schedule for a couple areas each week. I made a Discord and then I posted everywhere about wanting to do a large anniversary playthrough with real people. Play for the original Guild Wars game, not with henchmen or heroes, but with real people. I couldn't be the only one who wanted this, right? And what happened next really exceeded my wildest expectations. The event became a lot bigger than just my little stream. After a day, we had like 1,000 people in our Discord. Gaming news websites were writing articles about our playthrough. The Guild Wars Twitter reposted our trailer, and other content creators and their communities were joining in, like Muckluck and Teapot organizing his own hardcore playthrough. It was awesome. It felt like everybody was just excited to play Guild Wars 1 again. Not just my community, but everyone. We had so many people playing through the game together. We sometimes had like 12 parties running missions in parallel. People were helping each other out and teaming up in the Discord. Gosh, I had like so much fun. It really felt like, just for a brief period of time, it was 2006 again. And to be clear, that was not because of me making a website and a Discord server. It was because of people still loving this game and because of all the hard work everyone put in. Veterans running missions over and over to help new players. Lots of people streaming and making content. It was this amazing community effort and I'm so proud I got to be a part of it. I really want to thank every single one of you that's helped make the playthrough such a success. But then, besides this really cool event we did, the whole game was just popping off. Turns out, ArenaNet had actually released some really cool goodies for the 20th anniversary. There were new weapon mods, old exclusive items were made available again, and there was a new anniversary bundle on sale for a really low price. This was a lot bigger than just our event. So many people all returned to Guild Wars 1 at the same time. It just felt like the perfect storm. Just for a brief period of time, Guild Wars 1 was back, and I had the time of my life. And then, after a couple of amazing weeks, things kinda went back to normal. Guild Wars 1 went back into maintenance mode, waiting for all of us to return someday. I don't know, maybe for the 25th anniversary or something. Back in maintenance mode. Or did it? Announcing Guild Wars Reforged! Oh my god. So, to be clear, this is not a remake or a full remaster of Guild Wars 1. But apparently the 20th anniversary was such a success that the developers decided to invest into Guild Wars 1 again. In case you missed the announcement, there is a relatively new studio called 2 Weeks, founded by old ArenaNet developers, working on Guild Wars 1 again. They have teamed up with Steven, who has been the game director maintaining Guild Wars 1 for the past couple years. They are a relatively small team, but in just a couple days they're putting out a pretty significant modernization patch. They are adding controller support, Steam Deck verification, rendering improvements, UI fixes for modern resolutions, and they're doing this sort of soft relaunch, calling it Guild Wars Reforged. And Guild Wars Reforged isn't about a one-time update. We plan to keep collaborating with our partners at 2 Weeks to make further improvements to the game in the future. We are excited to be renewing our commitment to the game, starting December 3rd and continuing on into the future. I can't believe this is happening! Now, to be clear, Guild Wars Reforged isn't bringing new content to Guild Wars 1. It's not a remake of the game, or even a full remaster. But it does seem to mark Guild Wars 1 leaving maintenance mode. There are developers, plural, working on the game again. And who knows what kind of cool stuff they could do in the future. I just hope this is the moment Guild Wars 1 truly comes back. I hope that lots of people will play Reforged and that we'll see more and more improvements to the game. Maybe one day, even some new content. If you had asked me a couple years ago whether new content for Guild Wars 1 was possible, I would have told you, no way that's ever gonna happen. But now, I am not so sure. Maybe if this relaunch goes well, it might actually be possible. Maybe I am way too optimistic here, but I think Guild Wars 1 is an incredible game that still holds up really well. And I think Reforged is the best chance the game has had at a comeback ever. Maybe it is finally time for Guild Wars 1 to return for real, not just for a couple weeks, but permanently. If you have never played Guild Wars 1 before, I highly recommend you give it a shot. It is such a special experience and I think it holds up incredibly well. So yeah, Guild Wars Reforged, I am so excited. If you are also excited, join us this week as we go 250 years back in time and play through the game again at twitch.tv/Lorenancy. You are more than welcome to tag along. This is not a large organized playthrough like last time, but I'm hoping that with this relaunch the whole game will be super active again. Let's hope that this is the time Guild Wars 1 actually returns. Thank you so much for watching and I will see you in Ascalon City.